Refusing every woman in the county, the cowboy changed. When she said, "You want a wife or just a winter alone?" In a quiet county surrounded by wide plains and dusty roads, there lived a cowboy named Caleb Turner. People knew him well, even if they did not truly understand him. He was tall, strong, and worked harder than most men in the area. His ranch stood far from town, alone against the open land. Just like him, Caleb had something unusual about him. He refused every woman who showed interest in him. In that county, it was common for people to marry young. Life was not easy, and having someone beside you made it better. Winters were long and cold, and loneliness could feel heavier than the snow itself. So when a good man like Caleb stayed single year after year, people noticed. At first, they joked about it. "Caleb's too proud," some would say. "He thinks no one's good enough for him," others laughed. But as time passed, the jokes became quieter. People began to wonder if there was something deeper behind his choices. Many women had tried to get close to him. Some were kind and gentle, some were strong and confident. A few were even bold enough to speak their feelings clearly. But Caleb always gave the same answer: no. He was never rude. He never raised his voice. He would simply shake his head and say, "It's better this way." No one knew exactly what he meant by that. Some believed he had loved someone once and lost her. Others thought he was afraid of getting hurt. But Caleb never spoke about his past. He kept his thoughts to himself, just like he kept his distance from everyone else. His days were simple. He woke up early, worked on the ranch, cared for his cattle, fixed fences, and prepared for the changing seasons. He spoke very little, even when he came into town for supplies. He would buy what he needed, nod politely to others, and leave before anyone could start a long conversation. It was a quiet life, a lonely one. As autumn came to an end, the air grew colder, the wind became sharper, and the sky stayed gray for longer hours. Everyone in the county started preparing for winter. They stored food, repaired their homes, and made sure they would not be caught unready when the snow arrived. Winter in that land was not gentle. It tested people. It tested their strength, their patience, and sometimes even their hope. That was why people worried about Caleb. A man alone could manage many things, but winter was different. One evening inside the small town store, a group of locals gathered near the fire. They spoke in low voices. "He shouldn't stay alone this winter," an older man said. "He never listens," another replied. "He's made his choice." "But a man can't fight the cold and silence forever," the first one added. They all knew it was true, but no one knew how to change Caleb's mind. Then, one day, someone new arrived in town. Her name was Clara Hayes. She was not like the others. She did not come with soft smiles or quiet steps. She walked with confidence, spoke clearly, and looked people in the eye without fear. She had traveled from another place, and no one knew much about her past. But it was easy to see that she was strong and independent. People noticed her quickly, and soon she noticed Caleb. Their first meeting was simple. Caleb had come into town for supplies, just like always. He was focused on his work, not expecting anything different. But Clara stepped in front of him as he was about to leave. "You're Caleb Turner, right?" she asked. He looked at her, slightly surprised. "Yes." "I've heard about you," she said. Caleb gave a small nod. "People talk too much." Clara did not smile. "Maybe, but sometimes they're right." Caleb did not respond. He was used to people speaking about him, but not like this. Clara continued. "They say you refuse every woman in the county." "That's my business," Caleb said calmly. "Yes," she replied, "it is." There was a short silence between them, the kind that usually made people uncomfortable, but Clara did not step back and Caleb did not walk away. Finally, Caleb said, "If that's all, I have work to do." He tried to move past her, but then she said something that stopped him. "You want a wife?" she said, her voice steady. "Or just a winter alone?" Caleb froze. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Not with such direct words. Not with such honesty. He slowly turned back to face her. For the first time in a long while, he did not have an answer ready. The question stayed in the air between them, heavier than the cold wind outside. And somehow, without understanding why, Caleb Turner felt something shift inside him. After that day, Caleb Turner tried to forget Clara's words. He told himself it was nothing, just a question, just a stranger speaking too boldly. But no matter how much he tried, her voice stayed in his mind. "You want a wife? Or just a winter alone?" The words followed him everywhere. The next morning, Caleb woke up before sunrise, just like always. The air was cold, and a thin layer of frost covered the ground. He stepped outside, breathing in the sharp wind, and began his work. There were fences to check, animals to feed, and supplies to prepare. Winter was getting closer, and every small task mattered. Usually, work helped him stay focused. It kept his thoughts quiet. But this time, It was different. As he fixed a broken fence, he found himself staring at the empty land for longer than needed. As he fed the cattle, he noticed how silent everything felt. Even the sound of the wind seemed louder than before. That evening, he sat alone at his table. The room was simple. A wooden chair, a small fire, and a single plate of food. It had always been enough for him. He had never asked for more. But now, something felt missing. He looked at the empty chair across from him. It had always been empty, but for the first time, he noticed it. Caleb frowned slightly and pushed the thought away. "This is how it's always been," he said quietly to himself, but the words did not feel as strong as before. Days passed, and the cold grew stronger. The sky stayed gray, and the wind carried the promise of snow. People in town moved quickly, finishing their preparations. Everyone knew that once winter arrived, it would not be easy to leave their homes. Caleb went into town again to buy supplies. He told himself it was just for work, nothing more. But as he walked through the streets, his eyes searched without meaning to. He was looking for Clara. He found her near the stable, helping an older man carry heavy bags. She worked without complaint, her movement steady and sure. She did not look like someone who needed help, but someone who gave it. Caleb watched for a moment before stepping closer. "You don't have to do all that," he said. Clara turned and saw him. She did not look surprised. "Someone has to," she replied. The older man smiled and thanked her before walking away. Now it was just the two of them. "You're busy," Caleb said, unsure why he had spoken at all. "I usually am," she answered. There was a short pause. Caleb shifted slightly. He was not used to conversations like this. Words did not come easily to him. Finally, he said, "That question you asked?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" He looked at her. "You know which one." She crossed her arms lightly. "And?" Caleb hesitated. "It doesn't change anything." Clara studied him for a moment. "If it didn't, you wouldn't be bringing it up." He had no reply to that. She continued, "You don't have to answer me, Caleb. It's your life." Then she turned and started walking away. Caleb stood there, watching her leave. He felt something unfamiliar. Something like frustration, but deeper. Not at her, but at himself. Why couldn't he just ignore it? That night, the wind grew stronger. Clouds filled the sky, and the air felt heavy. People closed their doors early, knowing a storm was coming. The kind of storm that could last for days. Caleb checked his barn, secured his supplies, and prepared his home. He had done this many times before. He knew what to expect. But as the first snow began to fall, his thoughts returned to Clara again. He remembered the way she spoke, clear, direct, without fear. He remembered how she did not try to please him. And most of all, he remembered her question, "You want a wife, or just a winter alone?" Caleb stood by the window, watching the snow fall faster. For years, he had chosen to be alone. It had felt like the right choice. It had felt safe. But now, for the first time, he was not sure. The storm grew stronger, covering the land in white. The wind howled against the walls of his house. It was the kind of night where no one would step outside unless they had a very good reason. Caleb put on his coat. He stood near the door for a moment, thinking. Then, without saying a word, he opened it and stepped into the storm. The cold hit him immediately, but he did not stop. He walked to his horse, mounted quickly, and turned toward town. He did not fully understand why he was going. He only knew one thing. He did not want to spend another night pretending the question did not matter. The storm was stronger than Caleb expected. Snow covered the ground so fast that the path to town almost disappeared. The wind pushed hard against him, making it difficult to see or even breathe properly. His horse moved carefully, step by step, fighting against the cold and the deep snow. Any other day, Caleb would have stayed inside. He was not a careless man. He knew the danger of storms like this, but tonight was different. Tonight, his thoughts were louder than the storm. After a long and difficult ride, the lights of the town finally appeared through the snow. Most homes were closed tight, their windows dark or dim. People had already taken shelter. No one wanted to be outside in weather like this. Caleb rode straight to the stable and quickly tied his horse. His hands were cold, but he did not stop. He moved through the quiet street, looking around. For a moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake. Then he saw her. Clara was near one of the houses, helping an older couple secure their door. She held a lantern in one hand, its light shaking in the wind. Even in the storm, she looked calm and steady. Caleb walked toward her. When she turned and saw him, her expression did not change much. She simply looked at him, as if she had expected him to come. "You took your time," she said. Caleb stopped a few steps away. Snow covered his coat, and his face was tense from the cold. "I had work," he replied. Clara gave a small nod. Of course you did. The older couple thanked Clara and went inside, closing their door quickly to keep the cold out. Now it was just the two of them again, standing in the middle of the storm. Caleb looked at her, unsure how to begin. I came to talk, he said finally. Clara held the lantern a little higher, lighting his face. That's new. He ignored the comment. That question you asked me, it hasn't left my mind. She watched him quietly. Questions don't usually do that unless they matter. Caleb took a slow breath. I've been alone for a long time. It's easier that way. Easier doesn't always mean better, Clara said. He frowned slightly. You don't understand. Then explain, she replied. Caleb looked away for a moment. Speaking about himself was not something he did often, but something about this moment felt different, like if he stayed silent now, nothing would ever change. I had reasons, he said slowly. Things that made me think it's better not to depend on anyone. Clara did not interrupt. I got used to being alone, he continued. It became normal. Safe. The wind blew harder, but neither of them moved. Clara finally spoke. Safe from what? Caleb did not answer right away. He looked down at the snow, then back at her. From losing something again, he said quietly. There was honesty in his voice now, the kind he had not shown in years. Clara's expression softened just a little, but she did not step closer. Being alone doesn't stop loss, she said. It just makes sure you never have anything to lose. Caleb felt the weight of her words. He had never thought about it that way. For years, he believed he was protecting himself, but now it sounded different. Maybe, he said, but it's still hard to change. Clara nodded. It is. There was no judgment in her voice, just truth. Caleb looked at her again. Why do you care? Clara shrugged lightly. I don't like seeing people hide from their own lives. He almost smiled, but it faded quickly. I don't know if I can be what someone needs, he admitted. Clara's reply was calm and steady. That's not the right question. Caleb looked confused. Then what is? She stepped a little closer, the lantern light now between them. The question is, she said, are you willing to try? The storm seemed to quiet for a moment, or maybe it was just the way Caleb felt. No one had ever asked him that before. Not if he was ready, not if he was perfect, just if he was willing. Caleb thought about his empty home, the long silent nights, the years that had passed without change. I don't know, he said honestly. Clara nodded again. That's fine. He looked surprised. It is. Yes, she said, because not knowing means you're thinking about it, and that's already more than before. They stood there for a moment, the snow falling around them. Then Clara stepped back. You should get inside, she said. This storm isn't getting any weaker. Caleb hesitated. Will I see you again? Clara gave a small, calm smile. If you decide you want to. It was not a promise. It was a choice. Caleb understood that. He nodded once and turned to leave. As he walked back toward the stable, something inside him felt different. The silence he carried for so long was no longer as strong as before. For the first time, it had started to break. The storm lasted for 2 long days. Snow covered everything. Roads, fences, rooftops, and fields. The county became quiet, almost frozen in time. People stayed inside their homes, waiting for the wind to calm and the sky to clear. Caleb returned to his ranch that same night after speaking with Clara. The ride back had been just as hard, but something inside him felt lighter. Not easy, but different. For the first time in many years, he was thinking about more than just survival. The next morning, Caleb woke up and looked around his home. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt unfamiliar. The same wooden table, the same chair, the same silence. But now he noticed it more. He moved through his day like usual. He checked the animals, cleared snow from the barn, and made sure everything was safe. But his mind kept returning to Clara's words. Are you willing to try? He had no clear answer. But he knew one thing. He could not go back to ignoring the question. By the 3rd day, the storm began to fade. The wind slowed, and the sky slowly turned clear again. People started stepping outside, checking on neighbors, and fixing what the storm had damaged. Caleb stood outside his ranch, looking across the white land. The world felt calm again. But inside him, something had changed. He made a decision. Without wasting time, he prepared his horse and started toward town. This time, it was not because of a storm. It was not because of fear. It was because he wanted to go. The ride felt shorter than before. The air was still cold, but the sky was bright. When he reached town, people were busy clearing snow and helping each other. Life was slowly returning to normal. Caleb tied his horse and walked through the streets. He did not hesitate. He found Clara near the general store, carrying supplies. She looked just as steady as always, as if the storm had not shaken her at all. When she saw Caleb, she paused. "You made it through the storm," she said. "So did you," he replied. There was a small silence, but it was not uncomfortable this time. Caleb stepped closer. "I've been thinking." Clara nodded. "I figured you would." He looked at her directly. "I don't have everything figured out." "I didn't expect you to," she said. Caleb took a breath. Speaking honestly still felt new to him. "I spent years telling myself I was fine alone," he said. "Maybe I believed it. Maybe it was just easier that way." Clara listened without interrupting. "But now," he continued, "it doesn't feel the same. That quiet I used to like, it doesn't feel strong anymore. It just feels empty." Clara's expression softened slightly, but she stayed calm. Caleb went on. "I don't know what comes next. I don't know if I can promise anything big." "That's not what I asked for," Clara replied. He nodded. "I know." He paused, then said the words slowly, carefully. "But I do know this. I don't want another winter pretending I'm better off alone." The words were simple, but they carried weight. For a man like Caleb, this was not easy to say. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she gave a real smile. "Sounds like you've answered the question," she said. "Maybe not fully," Caleb replied, "but I'm closer than before." Clara adjusted the supplies in her hands. "So what now?" Caleb hesitated for just a second. Then he said, "I want to try." There was no pressure in his voice, no fear either, just honesty. Clara nodded slowly. Trying is a good place to start. They began walking together toward the store, not in a rush, not making anything too serious, just two people moving forward, one step at a time. The town around them was full of life again. People were talking, working, laughing. The cold was still there, but it didn't feel as heavy. Caleb noticed something he had not seen before, not because it was new, but because he had never looked for it: connection. For years, he had stayed apart from it. Now, he was stepping toward it. As they reached the store, Clara stopped and looked at him. "This doesn't mean everything will be easy," she said. Caleb gave a small nod. "I know. It takes time," she added. "I've got time," he replied. Clara smiled again, just a little. "Good," she said. That winter still came with cold nights and hard days. The snow still covered the land, and the wind still howled across the plains. But for Caleb Turner, it no longer felt like something he had to face alone. And for the first time in many years, the quiet of his life was no longer empty. It was changing.